Russia has continued its invasion of Ukraine, and earlier today, the two countries agreed to meet tomorrow along the Ukraine border with Belarus. It follows a call between Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and Belarus leader Alexander Lukashenko. For more on this, we are now joined by international relations expert John Stremlau. Good to have you with us tonight, and thank you very much for your time. And if we look, for example, at that particular development, you find the president of Ukraine, in his response, not really confident that anything would come out of that. He's saying, I will say frankly, as always, I do not really believe in the result of this meeting, but let them try, so that no citizen of Ukraine would have any doubt that I, as president, did not try to stop the war when there was even a small chance. That's what Zelensky is quoted as saying. That really tells us that he is really prepared that this is going to escalate further than where it is right now.
Well, it certainly seems that way, and good evening. And I'm not sure anyone is an expert quite on reading what Vladimir Putin's next moves are, because he's in the driver's seat with 190,000 troops bearing down on the good people of Ukraine. And yet I think he underestimated the international reaction, which has been unanimous in its condemnation. And just as a quick aside, I understand that in an hour in New York from now, there will be an emergency meeting of the Security Council to vote on a procedural matter, so it cannot be vetoed by the Russian government, to have an emergency within 24 hours meeting of the General Assembly. Now, they probably can't affect the overall peace process any more than Zelensky's meeting with Lukashenko or whoever else he's going to meet with in the border between Belarus and Ukraine. But nevertheless, it is symptomatic of the desire for peace and the desire to have these fundamental norms that of sovereign equality and territorial integrity that is the heartbeat of the United Nations and of the AU, to have Vladimir Putin back down a little bit, but he's not known for backing down.
Well, he's put his nuclear forces on high alert. Surely not signs for backing down, and I suppose also not a sign that he's going into those talks tomorrow with any intention of backing down.
Well, I think that's absolutely right. At the same time, the United States has been rather shrewd again in not rising to the bait of this announcement that he's put his nuclear forces on alert. And Biden's press secretary said, look, we're always on a degree of alert, and there's no reason to do anything special right now. But I'm very, very nervous about this because, again, with Putin, you just don't know how hard he's going to play for his pride and his sense of entitlement to recolonize Belarus.
South Africa's stance on what is developing there seems to be incoherent at the moment, or at least unclear. There's been conflicting messages that are coming out. Is that a bad thing, and how do we read that?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the question.
South Africa's stance on the situation in the Ukraine and Russia has been incoherent. There have been conflicting messages, for example, from Durko and from the presidency on the matter. What should we read into that?
Well, thank you for that. I keep referring to the February 24th statement by the government, which was that they called for peace immediately, for Russian withdrawal from Ukraine, which is good, and to respect the territorial integrity and sovereign equality of Ukraine, which is also good. There's not much that South Africa can do. We don't know how much oligarch money has been laundered and is down here in investments. We don't know how much conversations have been going on between the government from Jacob Zuma right down to the present day. But at the same time, South Africa does stand as a liberal democracy. It does support the Organization of African Unity's commitments to sovereign equality and territorial integrity, and I would expect that the South Africans will do the right thing in stating the obvious, that this is an aggression and it should not be tolerated by anyone. But that's not enough to stop Vladimir Putin. It's going to turn on much more immediate things like the level of resistance that his forces encounter in Ukraine, and then whether or not there's any knock-on effects within his ruling elite or coalition, or the people who are really quite suppressed within Russia, and whether the sanctions build power to undermine his economy. His economy is really very small. It's only 1% of the global economy, and compared to the 40% that is represented by the EU and the US. So I think that he may have overplayed his hand a little bit, but he is dangerous.
Yeah. Do you think South Africa stands at risk of making itself an enemy of Russia? I mean, we are not at war with Russia, as far as I know, in South Africa. But it seems the initial statement from Durko seemed to have been a little bit too harsh for the liking of the presidency, and they've kind of watered it down a little bit to say, as you put it, well, we believe in parties negotiating and we believe in mediation, as opposed to a stronger statement that called on Russia to withdraw its troops from the Ukraine.
Yeah, these are very hard to know what's going on within governments and what's being said publicly and what's being said privately. But we know the history that the Soviet Union supported the ANC, my party, and that the U.S. was aligned with the apartheid regime. We know that Jacob Zuma was carrying out a lot of conversations with the Russians about nuclear plants and stuff. We don't know what the details of all that are. We know that there is certainly a history, a complex history of interactions, but at the same time, we also know that had Gorbachev not come to power and had turned loose the aspirations of the near abroad, the satellites, the captured states, that the Russian Empire was the last empire, the Soviet Empire was the last empire, had that not Cold War ended, it would have been a lot more difficult to get the democratic transition here. So there are both the debts, but also leaders change, and Putin is of a different order of things. He is no Democrat. He doesn't understand how democracies work, and he is hell-bent on power and wealth, it seems to me. We only get glimpses of this from the revelations of the Pandora Papers and the financial bank statements that are starting to leak out about the kind of money laundering that goes on for the oligarchs, who most of them have their money abroad. So, including Putin. So we'll have to see, but it does make a difference who's leading, and I hope that Cyril Ramaphosa does the right thing and says what needs to be said repeatedly, that this cannot stand as an aggression against the sovereign, independent state. Let the people of Ukraine decide where they want to put their future.
The energy question, of course, also comes in here, Prof. Russia, of course, in this war, I suppose, has got this one card that they play, which is the supply of gas.